Hi everybody, it's Leela from Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video I am going to show you how I created these beer with foam tumblers. These tumblers are great gifts for him or even her, and they're very easy to make. Like always, I will be posting a list of materials that I use in this video along with a lot of my beginner help videos to help all my beginner viewers. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started on these tumblers. I'm starting with a 20-ounce stainless steel tumbler from Makerflow Crafts. I went ahead and I sanded this down with a 180 grit sanding block, and then I wiped it down using 91% alcohol. You can also use 99% alcohol. After I did that, I spray painted this with a flat or matte white. It is not very important that you spray paint this very evenly. As you can tell, mine's not as even as it can be, but it is important that you do spray this with a flat or matte. The reason is because we're going to be adding alcohol inks on this, and alcohol inks are very thin, so the epoxy, whenever it goes to epoxy, you want it to actually stick to the alcohol inks and the matte spray paint. So if you use gloss, then whenever you epoxy, your cup might repel, so the epoxy might not stick to the gloss, because epoxy likes to stick to rough surfaces rather than the smooth and shiny surfaces. If you don't have any white or flat spray paint on hand, you can always use some acrylic paint as well. I will be using only one color for this tumbler. It's going to be Butterscotch from Tim Holtz. I did purchase this from Amazon. I'll try to find the link and then put it in the description below for y'all. I'll also be using paint brushes. You can use a sponge brush or a regular paintbrush, whichever one you have on hand. And then I'll also be using my 91% alcohol. The reason why we're using this 91% alcohol is because we want to make kind of a foamy look for the beer. So make sure your alcohol is inside of a little spritzer or a spray bottle instead of just kind of dripping it on there. For my first step of this tumbler is going to be just adding the alcohol all over the tumbler using either my sponge brush or my regular brush, whichever one you have on hand, and we're just going to wipe it up and down the tumbler. So this is going to be very similar to like a wood grain tumbler. This is how you do the wood grain effect, but with different colors. Very, very easy. So just make sure you cover your tumbler completely. And it doesn't have to be even, I'm just placing this on the tumbler. You can see there's some areas that are darker than others. There's areas that are a little lighter. And then don't forget to do your bottom. So I just place it on the bottom. I have to lift it up some. And then I just do it like so. And then I'm just going to go around and try to fill this up. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the white covered, so I don't care about the different colors or the different tones. You can see there's different textures on here. All I care about is getting the entire tumbler covered for the most part. And it looks like it is completely covered, and whenever it's covered, it's going to dry almost immediately. So you can see this is completely dried. My apologies, I didn't mention that I do use a little makeup brush. So this is a little Wedge brush that I purchased from CVS. It comes in a little makeup pack. So I do have that on hand just in case I need it. I don't always use it, but you'll see if I need to use it or not. So now I'm going to take my 91% alcohol and I'm just going to spritz my alcohol. So you can see, I'm just going to spritz it and it turns into that bubbly effect. So you can see those bubbles. See if I can focus. You can see those bubbles on the camera. And then it makes kind of like bubbles, and it also makes like smears and stuff. So I'm going to spritz this tumbler with my spritzer. And the further away that you are from the tumbler, the more like bubble effect you'll get, because it's a spritzer. So it's spritzing out and it's opening up as it's getting further and further. So just keep that in mind. If you want to make sure that this tumbler is more bubbly, then just kind of spritz it a little further than closer. So then I go around and I kind of blot it, and this does a little bit to it. It creates kind of more of a bubbly look, kind of fades it in and out. And then if you notice that there's a spot right here that's white, what I do is I just take my butterscotch again, and then I just kind of cover it up again with the butterscotch using the brush. And then I take my 91% alcohol again, and I just repeat that process. Try not to overthink this because it's beer, so it's just a bubbly drink. So you see how it turned bubbly now? But I do like to make sure that most of the white areas are kind of covered. You can see this is a very light tumbler, but I don't want like a big white spot in the middle. So you're going to have like a transparent look. That's okay. That's kind of what you want. But you don't want a big, I don't personally want a big white circle on the tumbler. Here is my tumbler so far, and you can see that this is completely dried. Like I said, alcohol ink dries very quickly. If you do want your tumbler to be darker, mine is actually darker in person than it's showing on camera, but if you want it to be darker, just keep repeating the process. So you can see like right here, this is a little darker than up here. It's because I have more alcohol ink on there. So you would put the alcohol ink on the tumbler with the brush and then spritz it with the 91% alcohol, and then kind of blot it around if you need to with your makeup wedge. You can also use like a napkin, but I know this is like spongy, so you will get a different effect. So if you don't have the sponge stuff, you can try to make it work with a napkin. If you are going to be using a napkin, don't push down as hard, just kind of very lightly blot, because the napkins, they're a little heavier than these. These are very lightweight, so that's why we use these for the tumblers, because it's lighter weight. So make your tumbler whichever way you want to make it, darker or lighter, and then I'm going to move on to the next step.
All right, so on to my next step. I do have my respirator mask on, which is why I probably sound a little foggy. But so that means we are going to be adding epoxy to this tumbler. So I'm not going to seal my tumbler. I'm not going to spray seal it. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to go in and apply the epoxy. But what I'm doing with the epoxy is doing the drip effect. So the way that I'm doing my drip effect is I will be using Counterculture's DIY Nice and Thick. I'll have this in my description below, the link to purchase this. A lot of people know about this, but if you don't know about this, what this is this allows your epoxy to kind of harden a lot quicker than what it typically will. So I know if a lot of y'all saw my ice cream tutorial with the drip effect, I did not use this stuff. So I waited for the epoxy to dry. So if you don't have this, don't worry, you can still achieve this look. You would just wait for your epoxy to dry and then kind of play with it more. But I will say I used this only one time before this video, and I absolutely love it. This is a game changer and is worth every penny that it is purchased for. So I do highly recommend using that. I have my epoxy mixed in my cup. I am going to be mixing, I mix 5 milliliters of part A and 5 milliliters of part B, totaling 10 milliliters of epoxy. So I have my epoxy completely mixed. So before you're adding, if you are using the Nice and Thick, before you add it, make sure your epoxy is completely mixed properly. So make sure you have it mixed all the way, and then you're going to go in and you're going to add the Nice and Thick a little bit at a time. So I'll make sure I'll show y'all. Whenever I was trying to see how to use this, it was really hard to find a good tutorial. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to just explain this further. So if you are interested, or if you just want to use this and you've had it for a long time and you're just scared to use it, I want to kind of break it down step by step for y'all. Again, my epoxy is mixed all the way. I mixed both parts, and I am using 10 milliliters of epoxy. That's all I need for this tumbler. So what I do now is, this is a powder form. I just take a wooden stick and I just apply a little bit. That's actually a lot of it. But I apply a little bit to the tumbler at a time, or to the Dixie cup at a time. And then I stir with my other stirring stick. So I'm applying it a little bit at a time, I'm stirring it, and then I'll apply more. So the reason why we apply this a little bit at a time is because we don't want to overwhelm the epoxy with the powder. You want to just slowly add it. It's like baking. You know, a lot of bakers, you don't want to overwhelm with adding all the ingredients at one time. So I'm going to add more, and this is how much I'm adding each time. And then I will stir it. So the question that I always had whenever I used this was, how much do I add? Well, there's not a real clear answer for that, because each person wants their epoxy thick or thin. So I want a thicker consistency of this epoxy. So I'm going to be adding a little more than the drip effect, because I want a drip, but I want mostly the foaming. So I want mostly that top half to be a little foamy with a little bit of drip. So I don't want it to drip all the way down. So if you want to have a drip to go all the way down the tumbler, add a little bit less of the consistency powder. If you want to have less of a drip where it just sticks more up top on the tumbler, then add more of this powder. So along with this, what I do is I'm going to add a white alcohol ink to this. I'm sorry, white acrylic paint to this. And I'm just adding it from Apple Barrel from Walmart. I know on this container of this bottle, it does say only recommend to adding powder formed of colorant. I've added this with this before and it did fine with me. So I'm going to continue to add this alcohol ink or this acrylic paint anyway. So if you do want to listen to the bottle, then you can add mica powder to this. But I know a lot of y'all know I don't really work with mica powder too much. I prefer acrylic paint over mica powder. And then I'm just going to mix that. So I mixed the acrylic paint after I mixed the powder because the acrylic paint makes it kind of sticky. So I like to put that a little after, and then if I need to add more powder, then I'll add more powder, because the acrylic paint also helps it become sticky as well. So I add that kind of towards the end. So you can see that it is dripping. I don't want a nice drip. I want it to kind of stick together, so I'm just going to add more. And I think this is my 5th time adding more. I could be wrong because I've been yapping. But make sure you don't stick your face in here because a lot of the powder goes everywhere, as you can see. And that's why I have a my craft towel down to kind of protect my space. And then if you see inside of there, it gets really sticky. So you can see it's starting to get sticky. That's what you want. You want it to be like dried epoxy. So if you go and let your epoxy dry for an hour in a cup and you come back, you're going to have this be sticky. So I'm still having that nice drip. So I'm going to add a little bit more because the drip is getting a little slower. So I think this is my 6th time adding more. And then I'm just going to stir. You could start seeing that it's going to get very clumpy. So keep stirring until you don't have any clumps in there. All of the powder is completely dissolved. You want this to be completely liquid. And I'm going to add just a little bit more acrylic paint to here. Just a tinge, nothing too crazy. So just a couple drops. And then I'm going to mix it again. And I think my consistency that I want is about right. So you can see it barely even moves now. Oops, let me get you on camera. It sticks right to the popsicle stick. That's what I want. And I'd rather make it too sticky than too runny, because I'll show y'all if I do make it too sticky and not as runny, I can just take my heat gun and then I can just kind of heat it up and then it'll melt because it's really epoxy. So now I have this tumbler. And what I'm going to do is, I would usually put this on my cup turner, but I have a lot of cups over there running. I'm going to take my popsicle stick. I'm going to put some on the end of my popsicle stick. And I'm just going to line the edge. So I am focusing on the rim. And the way that I like to describe this is I'm just icing a cake. That's all I'm doing. So I'm just going to scoop more up. And then ice the cake. It reminds me of those little Cinnabuns. And then you don't have to worry about keeping your cup like parallel to the desk, because this stuff is amazing and it hardens your epoxy so quickly. And I only use 10 milliliters of epoxy. So a little bit of this epoxy on this edge goes a long ways. So I focus on the edge first. I make sure that it's completely covered. And since this is beer, I really want that texture. So I want it to be a little sloppy because, you know, the head of the beer or the foam of the beer, it is, it's foam. So it's not completely perfect, I should say. So it's not smooth. So I'm just smoothing this out. And then what I do is I kind of blot it with the wooden stick. And then I just carry it down some. So I don't carry it down like a, for this specific tumbler, I'm not going to carry it down like a drip. But I'm going to add this to the tumbler. And then I'm just going to, let me find a spot so I can see on the camera. And then I'm just going to kind of rub it in circles. So it's not going to be a small little drip, but it's going to have that foam effect. And then I just pick up my popsicle stick. And then I add more to my stick again. And then I go around a different area. So that was that area. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to rub this in circles as well. Because I want that foamy effect. I don't necessarily want that drip all the way down the tumbler. If you do want the drip down the tumbler, then so be it. I think it will look nice either way. But this is just the look that I'm personally going for. So I'm just going in small little circles. And then areas where there's only a little bit like that, right here above the wooden stick, those are the areas I'm going to add more epoxy to. So I'm just going to rub it in little circles, small circles. And I'm not even really looking at it because I'm trying to show y'all more than looking at it. So that just shows you that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to stick it on there. And you're going to have uneven areas. You can see this is uneven. That's what I want. Because again, I want to get that foam effect. So I'm going to go around this tumbler and finish this up. And then we'll move on with the next step. I wanted to mention to y'all one of the reasons why I don't like to seal it. It's because the epoxy picks up that alcohol ink and it kind of mixes in. So on here, I don't know if you can see it, but the alcohol ink is kind of in the foam. So in real beer, it isn't completely white. There's some beer that comes up inside the foam area or the head area. So that's kind of what it is here. So I'm trying to get the lighting and focus. So you can see that it's a little yellow right around here. So that's why, one of the reasons why I don't seal the tumbler before I add the foam to the tumbler. I am finished adding my foam or my epoxy to the top of my tumbler. And you can see the nice layers on here. Right over there, you see how it's not as much of a drip. If you do want a drip, more of a drip, then just take your heat gun and add a little bit heat, and it's going to loosen up that epoxy and it's going to make it drip a little bit. So over time this might drip some, but there's a lot of the counterculture powder in here, so this is very thick. I made it very thick so I could have this foam effect. So here it is from a distance. Let me see if I can focus. And then over time it's going to drip a little bit. So this is going to take 12 hours to cure because remember, there's still epoxy on here. So it won't take as long as 24 hours because it has additives in here with the paint and stuff, but it is going to take 12 hours. So I'm going to allow this to cure for 12 hours. I'm just going to place it on my cup turner. I'm not going to turn the cup turner on. There's no reason to. Or you can place it upside down on one of your drying racks. So I'll see y'all in about 12 hours when this is dried.
Welcome back, everybody. I am back with my tumbler, and my foam, or the epoxy up top, is completely dried. So it took about 12 to 13 hours to dry. Again, it didn't take 24 hours or anything. So I really like how this one is like the foam and it's kind of bumpy. I like that because it looks more real with the foam. I want to show y'all another one I just finished. It's still in the process of being made, but I finished the drip. And you can see this one is more of a drip effect. So I wanted to show y'all both of the ways to show you how it would look. So if you want more of the drip effect look, go for the drip effect. And if you want more of the foamy look, add more of that, let your epoxy sit longer, or add more of that powder to let it sit harder. So this was a lot less, and I added more drip to here, and it kind of has that nice drippy effect. I like the foamy effect because it looks more real, but whichever look you want to go for. For my next step of this tumbler, I am going to epoxy it like I did this one. You could see this one is a little bit more shinier because I went ahead and I epoxied this just to see how I would like epoxying over the foam or the epoxy up here, and I actually really do like it. If you did watch my drip tutorial on my ice cream tumbler, I did this a different way. So I would epoxy and decorate the entire cup, and then I do the drip last, and then I'll be finished. But I wanted to try it a different way just to show y'all a different way to do it. So for my next step, I'm going to be epoxying this entire cup, including the foam part. You don't have to do the foam or the drip part, but I just did it, and I like that glossy look that it gives it. It gives it a nice shine to it, and it really locks everything into place. So I'm going to epoxy, and then that's after I epoxy, I'll wait 24 hours to add my decal, and then I'll go ahead and epoxy again. So I'm gonna get my epoxy ready, and then I'll move on to my epoxy station.
Okay guys, I'm back with my epoxy with my face mask on. I mixed a total of 14 milliliters of epoxy. That's 7.5 milliliters part A and 7.5 milliliters part B, totaling 14 milliliters of epoxy. I just want a very thin coat of epoxy to put on my cup, just to sealing everything. So just want to seal in that alcohol ink I placed. And remember, I did not put any sealer on this alcohol. I didn't add acrylic coating. I didn't add clear spray paint. I'm just going into epoxy, and you can see it does not fade off. It actually makes the cup a little bit darker whenever you add that epoxy. So if you notice my other tumbler that was already epoxied, it looked a little darker than this. So if yours does look a little faded, then it's all right. Whenever you put that epoxy on here, it's going to darken right up. So I'm just going to put this epoxy right over that foam or the drip effect up top, just to give it a little double sealer. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You could just put the epoxy on here and just leave this like it is. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to do it this way because, like I said, I've never tried this way before, and I like how that turned out. It looked like it was all sealed into the tumbler, so it turned out very well for me. So now I'm going to do the bottom, and I still have a little bit of epoxy left over, so you could have used 10 milliliters of epoxy for this 20-ounce tumbler because I put a very thin coat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this sit on the cup turner for about 4 to 5 hours. After about 4 to 5 hours, I'm then going to turn off my cup turner, and then I'm going to let it to air dry or air cure for another 20 hours. The reason why I want to do this for 24 hours is because I'm going to be adding a decal after this. Anytime I place a decal on my tumbler after I epoxy, I make sure the epoxy is dried or cured for at least 24 hours. The reason for that is because I went to decal a tumbler before, and the epoxy was only dried or cured for about 15 to 16 hours. I didn't like the decal. I went to go take it off, and I actually ripped up my epoxy, and it wasn't actually cured. I ruined the entire cup, and I had to redo the whole thing. So that's why I personally like to wait 24 hours. So I'm going to let this spin, air dry, air cure, and then I'll return with my next step. See y'all then.
Welcome back, everybody. My tumbler has been epoxied. It's been sitting for at least 24 hours, and this is now complete. You can see how shiny the white foam is at the top. I like sealing that in with epoxy. I've actually decided not to put a decal on this only because I am going to be selling these. So I don't want to place a decal and lock it in. I want to sell it to somebody and have them personalize it. So maybe they'll put their name on it, or maybe their brewing company, or maybe their favorite brewing company, or their business, whatever they want to put on this tumbler. So these are really, really cute for Father's Day, especially St. Patty's Day. And they're very easy to make. You could see the difference of these two. So when I do put a decal on this, what I'm going to do is still seal over this foam. So I just want to let y'all know that that's what I'm going to do. If you don't want to, you don't have to. So I would put my decal on this. I'd probably mix about 20 milliliters of epoxy, put mostly the epoxy over the decal to really seal that in so it's not like peeking through, and then just add more epoxy up here, but just very thin. Just as thin as what I did earlier. So, and if it does get a little bumpy, this is already bumpy, so it's not going to affect it. So I just want to make sure that this cup is smooth with the same amount of epoxy all around the tumbler. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.